All right, welcome everybody. We're going to get started in just a minute. A good amount of people coming in. So yeah, I think David, you can kick things off.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming to the virtual public information meeting for the upcoming Sixth Street project. We are recording this meeting so that those who can't attend will be able to watch it later. It will be posted to the project website. Uh, I'll do my introduction. My name is David Tapia. I work for the City of Milwaukee in the Department of Public Works. I'm the major projects manager and kind of the point person from the city on this project. The rest of the design team will introduce themselves as we kick off this project. Probably looks like some more people are still joining. So Kate, if you guys want to go ahead, or Mike, I guess, do your introductions while Jesse keeps letting people in.
Yep, sounds good. Thanks, David. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mike Hammond with HNTV Corporation, working on behalf of the City of Milwaukee on this project. I'm serving as our consultant project manager. Kate?
Hi, everybody. Kate Reardon. I'm with HNTV. I'm the planning and public involvement lead for the project.
Tim?
Tim Keefe, also with HNTV. I am the project engineer on the 6th Street Next project.
And Jesse.
Hi, I'm Jesse, a planner at HNTV, and I'm supporting the meeting, keeping track of all the questions that are being asked, admitting people into the meeting, all of the background work.
Great. Well, we've got a lot of great content to share today. Before we do that, Kate's going to go through some housekeeping before we get moving.
Yeah, so just a heads up about how things will run here. So you may have noticed you are unable to unmute or turn on your camera. We are going to be using the Q&A option on Teams to answer questions. We've got about 30 slides to get through, and we will pause at 5 different points to answer questions. So everybody is muted. There's the raise hand option, but we won't be using that. So if you do raise your hand, we will lower it. Instead, we ask that everybody use the Q&A option on Teams to ask any questions. As Jesse noted, he'll be keeping track of each of those questions and we'll be answering them live. If your question is unanswered or you think of something later that you wanted to ask, please email our project email at sixthstreetproject@hntv.com. You can also view all of the information that we presented at the in-person public meetings and fill out a comment form on the project website. That's engage.milwaukee.gov/sixthstreet. As David noted, we are recording this presentation. We will post it to the website either today or tomorrow. So if you know others who weren't here, or you want to go back to something, please feel free to share that or view it again. So just a heads up, I noted that we'll be pausing 5 times to answer questions. So just so you know when we're going to be answering questions, Mike and I will be giving project background and existing conditions. We'll stop after that to answer any questions related to those slides. And then this project corridor is split up into 4 different segments. And so after each of those segments, we'll pause to answer any questions related to those segments. We'll turn it back to Mike.
Great. Well, thanks again, everybody, for taking the time to engage on this project this afternoon. As Kate noted, we have a lot of exciting alternatives to share with you today, but before we do that, we just wanted to provide some overview on how we got here and where we're heading with this project. So first and foremost, the 6th Street project is a result of and is in alignment with many planning efforts that have occurred throughout the city. First on the screen there, you see the Complete Streets policy. The policy was signed into law in 2018 with a focus on creating safe, comfortable, and convenient streets for all users with the aim of increased mobility and decreased motor vehicle speeds. Second plan on there, Connecting MKE Downtown Plan. That was an update to the downtown plan that was completed in recent years. This plan and the engagement that occurred as a part of it identified 6th Street in this corridor as a critical corridor for both transit and pedestrian use with enhanced public spaces. Then finally, last on the list, the city's Vision Zero policy, which was adopted in 2022 with the goal of eliminating serious injuries and fatalities from traffic crashes. So all three of these plans and the many other planning efforts that the city have serve as a foundation for our team's work to identify transportation solutions for this corridor, which we'll be sharing in the presentation later this afternoon. On the next slide, you can see, based on sort of those plans and feedback that we've heard from the community and stakeholders, the following project elements and goals were developed for the 6th Street corridor. So first, starting at the top with the project elements, improving pedestrian accommodations on the corridor. This could be through things like increased sidewalk space or shorter crossing distances. Second, adding new dedicated transit lanes and enhanced stops where feasible. There are many MCTS routes that travel through various portions of the project, and we're always looking for ways to improve reliability and rider experience as a part of the project. Third, fully separate bike lanes, again, increasing comfort and safety of those riding their bikes on the corridor. Fourth, increasing the tree canopy, and really that's a broader goal around increasing and greening the corridor as a whole along the entirety of 6th Street. Fifth, right-sizing the roadway. It's really taking a look at the current transportation use that's out there today and taking a look at that space and determining the best use of that space. And then finally, you see the note about reconstructing a portion of the corridor. So we do anticipate fully constructing at least a portion of the corridor within our preferred alternative, really allowing for a full reimagining of the transportation space that's out there. So then out of that, you can see the 4 project goals that have been established to date. Again, those are driving some of the alternatives that Kate will share with you today. Increasing walkability, reducing motor vehicle speeds, integrating that green infrastructure to capture stormwater where it falls, and using transit stops for placemaking. The next slide, we'll talk a little bit about timeline and funding. First, the 2 bigger notes at the bottom of the slide around funding. So this project, the 6th Street corridor, was funded through a roughly $36 million federal discretionary grant. That grant was rescinded through the One Beautiful Big Beautiful Bill Act, as you can see on the screen there. The city does have $2.1 million from that grant to advance preliminary design and complete an environmental document. But beyond that, that grant is not available at this time to fund final design and construction of the project. But as you can see, that second note on the screen, the city, Milwaukee, and Department of Public Works is actively seeking funding options to advance the corridor through final design and construction. So based on that funding picture, you can see our schedule and plan for progress on the project at the top of the screen. Right now, we're on that far left side of the screen with this first round of engagement where we're presenting corridor alternatives, and this meeting is a part of that round of engagement. So we're going to take that feedback along with some technical analyses that we'll conduct on our end to determine what a preferred alternative looks like for the entire corridor, and we'll present that preferred alternative to the public in 2026. And the feedback we receive from the public through that second round of engagement will allow us to refine and prepare a preliminary design and ultimately an environmental document. And then that would set up the project well to proceed to final design and construction once funding is identified. So now that we've covered a quick overview, I'll let Kate talk about our approach to the corridor, some data we've collected, and those proposed alternatives.
Thank you, Mike. So we're calling this project 6th Street Next because we are hoping we want the community to come around a shared vision for the future of 6th Street. And this future is shaped by the past and the present. So you'll see images flashing by on the screen of different intersections throughout the project corridor. We used historical images from the Milwaukee Public Library and then compared them to present day images so that we can honor the past of the corridor and all the vibrant neighborhoods that existed prior to street widening and really kind of disconnecting the community. We're also acknowledging the challenges and needs of today's users through 6th Street now, again, so that we can rally behind a shared vision for 6th Street Next. So part of the Connecting MKE Downtown Plan 2040 was identifying 6th Street as a transit priority corridor. And you can see in this inset map that's in the center of the screen, 6th Street, particularly in downtown, is used by a lot of transit routes. They really overlap a lot in that downtown section because there's so many that use it. 6th in Wisconsin also has the highest number of transfers in the entire Milwaukee County transit system. So you can see these dots throughout the corridor show the different transit ridership numbers at each transit stop. So 6th in Wisconsin is not only the highest on the corridor, but also the entire system. And then 6th in National is another really high transfer point on the project corridor. This map shows the bike network and pedestrian and bike crossings at intersections throughout the corridor. And you'll notice that with pedestrian crossings, that really correlates with the transit ridership as people are crossing the street to use different bus stops. They're walking across the street as pedestrians. So we've captured that data here. So like Mike said, similar to the goals that are informing the design, this data is also helping inform the design alternatives that we've selected for this project. So this map shows a heat map of crash density. So you can see where we have different hotspots throughout the corridor for crashes. A couple of overview stats about crashes. 40% of all severe or fatal injury crashes on 6th Street involved a person walking, and 20 serious injury or fatal crashes there were 20 serious injury or fatal crashes along the corridor between 2020 to 2024. So Mike mentioned Vision Zero, and one of the goal of that is to eliminate these types of crashes. So again, that's something we're taking into consideration as we develop designs. So moving along the corridor on the northern end, the highest crash rate is at 8th and North Avenue. There were 3 fatal or serious injury crashes at McKinley Avenue. You can see that's another major hotspot. There's a pedestrian fatality at Juneau Avenue. And there were 3 fatal or serious injury crashes at Wisconsin Avenue. On the flip side, a bright spot on our map of crashes, the roundabout at Florida Street has been kind of notorious in the city for the number of crashes there. But a traffic calming project was implemented from Canal Street to the roundabout that has resulted in a sharp decline in crashes. So this is the type of work that we want to replicate throughout the corridor. So we've come to our first pause for questions and answers. So if you have any questions on those first slides about project overview or any of the data that we presented, please enter those into the Q&A now. As a reminder, everybody is muted. We are using the Q&A option, so enter any questions into there. And Jesse is monitoring that and will ask questions live. Any questions so far?
Jesse, just quickly, I went in to see if I could, and it's saying Q&A is not available for this event. Turn it on from meeting options. So because nobody else could probably chime in from the public, I want to make sure that we're able to do this.
Mine has it on. It shows that it's on.
Mine does as well.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so our first question, are there any options for raised crosswalks on 6th Street to help prevent pedestrian deaths?
Tim, would you like to answer that question? I'll say right now we're in the really broad design
Yeah, I
phase, so
think
we're looking at big concepts.
that is certainly an element that we will explore as we get later on in the design phase. I think right now where we're at is kind of really big picture planning as far as a modal hierarchy and establishing how we prioritize the different transportation uses on the corridor within the existing right of way. I think once we get to a sort of preferred alternative as far as how we allocate space within the cross sections, that's the next step is to look at then detailed design as far as how we enhance pedestrian safety, bicyclist safety, transit experience, etc.
Thanks, Tim.
One more question. Why is this project ending at 6th and North Avenue? There appears to be no tax dollars being used to improve the inner city / Bronzeville area.
David, do you have a response?
Not really, because I wasn't really part of the process in determining where the corridor limits were going to be, but a lot of this came out of other plans, and I'm not sure if the connecting downtown had identified these same limits at that time. Like most projects, it's trying to connect the neighborhoods, so I don't know if that was sort of coming up to it, sort of like only taking it down to national and not beyond it. So yeah, I don't have a great answer for why it didn't continue to go any further north than that.
All right, those are all the questions we have for this section.
Thanks, Jesse. And we'll have a couple other spots where we will pause for questions. And we'll get into the segments. So this is a pretty long corridor. It's over 2.5 miles. And if you can visually imagine what it's like as you travel throughout the corridor, we've got lots of different land uses, street widths, and different just cross sections as you go throughout the corridor. So we divided the corridor up into 4 different segments. Starting on the south end, National Avenue to the roundabout at Florida Street is our first segment. Our second segment is the roundabout to Clybourne Street. The third is Clybourne Street to McKinley Avenue. And the fourth is McKinley Avenue to North Avenue. So I'll be going through each of these one segment at a time, talking about existing conditions for those segments, and then presenting our options for those segments. So segment number 1 is National Avenue to the roundabout at Florida Street. So over on the left, we have images of what cross-section looks like there. So we have about 60 feet of what's called public right-of-way. This is the width in which we can work and design the street. So we have sidewalks on either side, parking lane, 2 parking lanes, 1 on each side, and then 1 driving lane in each direction. The photo below shows what that looks like in real life. And then some images just to ground us in the corridor. Zocalo Food Park is part of this corridor. And then the image on the right is showing the intersection with National Avenue, the southernmost limit of this corridor. So along this part of the corridor, we have about 9,400 vehicles traveling daily. Posted speed limit throughout the corridor is 30 miles per hour, and we have the lowest speeds in this segment. Just about 30% of people driving in this segment are going more than 30 miles per hour, and just a little over 1% are going more than 40 miles per hour. So one of the options that we have for this corridor is what we're calling widened sidewalks. So this would be a reconstruction of this part of the corridor, widening the sidewalks. As far as widths go, there could be some reallocation of widths of sidewalk on either side. So I wouldn't say don't get too caught up in some of these details, but this would widen the sidewalks and then repurpose parking on one side of a block for green infrastructure or a planting strip. So that could be on either side of the block. So we could have parking on the west side of the block and a strip of trees on the right side of the block. And then the next block, it could switch and we could have parking on the west side and trees and green infrastructure on the east side. Our second option for this corridor is called the green corridor. So we would maintain one driving lane in each direction, parking, and then we would repurpose select parking spots for curb extensions or bump outs that we could put green infrastructure in or trees. So the image on the left shows what it would look like from a bird's eye view. So you can see there's still parking lanes on both sides of the street as opposed to the previous alternative, which has it just on one side of the street. But we do take some of those parking spots and repurpose them as curb extensions or bump outs where we can add more trees and green infrastructure, achieving some greening of this part of the corridor. So now we'll pause for questions on this segment of the corridor. Again, these are our two options here. So if you have any questions about these options in particular or about the existing conditions of this corridor, you can enter them into the Q&A now.
So we have, while we wait for questions on that section, we do have a follow-up from the first group. And David, this is to you. How were neighbors engaged in terms of determining the project limits?
Again, I'm not part of like the initial process. Once the city and the entities that were responsible for pursuing this project, putting together the application, then it gets turned over to me to then work with the design team to deliver the project. But again, I know one of the drivers was that Connect MKE downtown plan that I had identified this street as a catalyst project. And so I think it was born out of that. Again, how the termini were determined, I can't speak to because I wasn't actually part of that process.
Looking at the corridor itself from National to Roundabout, what is the plan for emergency vehicles?
It would be, I think, similar to how it functions today. And Tim or David, if you wanted to chime in, we're not changing the cross section too much. There could be a curb extension. So if you're driving and an emergency vehicle is behind you, you'll just have to wait until there's a spot to pull over to let that emergency vehicle go through. Pretty similar to how the street functions today and many other streets in the city function today.
Right. I would just echo what you just said, Kate, as far as, number of lanes and lane width with this particular segment of the corridor. Not changing too substantially. Everything, the option where one parking lane might be replaced with a green infrastructure, trees, landscaping, et cetera. That would affect more the curb lane. So there could be, maybe less opportunity to pull over into like an unused parking space in that. But, we are maintaining the same number of through lanes, lane width, and at least one curb lane in this option. So it would function similar to how it does today.
Another question about this corridor, can parking be removed on one side completely for a concrete bollard protected bicycle lane?
So one of our early alternatives that we presented to the city did include a two-way protected bike lane on one side. But the city has plans to route bicycling on 5th Street. So that is the plan. They prefer to not have it on 6th Street and to maintain 6th Street as a priority street for walking and with bicycling being routed down 5th Street.
I just want to wait a few more seconds. All right.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on to our next segment. So this is moving north in the corridor, going from the roundabout at Florida Street to Clybourne Street. So this is essentially the viaduct. So it's two bridge structures. You may, if you're familiar with this section, you may know that south of Canal Street, that traffic calming project I mentioned that improved crashes at the roundabout was implemented in the past last year. So the images we're showing here on the left are north of Canal Street. So this really shows all of the width we have to work with. So it's about 75 feet across with sidewalks, painted on-street bike lanes, two driving lanes in each direction. And because this is a bridge structure, we will not be reconstructing it. It would be too costly and it's in good condition. So all the options that we have on the next couple of slides would go on top of the existing bridge structure. We may have some opportunity to do something different, Canal Street or north and south parts of the corridor where it's not a bridge structure, but in general, we will just be placing materials on top of the bridge structure. So there's higher vehicle volumes on this segment, about 14,300 per day. Again, posted speed limit is 30 miles per hour. We do have higher speeds in this segment, and these speeds were taken north of Canal Street. So there's about 3/4 of people driving over the speed limit, over 30 miles per hour, and about 17% driving more than 40 miles per hour. So our first option for this segment is similar to what's south of Canal Street. So that would be reducing the number of driving lanes to 2 and putting in one-way protected bike lanes, one northbound and one southbound. And again, some of the widths here at some of the public meetings, people asked about the 10-foot barriers or the 7-foot bike lanes. Some of these widths can be adjusted as we figure out the final design, just as a note. Our next option is similar to the first one. However, we put a two-way protected bike lane on the west side of the street. This allows people two-way access to the Hank Aaron State Trail, which you can access both at Canal Street, but then also there's a ramp down to Freshwater Way, kind of in the middle of the bridge structure between Canal Street and the roundabout. And if you're familiar with this and you've biked there before, you may know that the sidewalk is there's a high curb from the sidewalk down to the street level. So we would figure out some kind of ramping to allow people to access the Hank Aaron State Trail and then get in and out of the street as they access it. This also maintains a northbound one-way protected bike lane so that if people are just going straight through the corridor, they're not accessing the Hank Aaron State Trail, they have that option on the east side of the street. And our last option is, again, similar to that, the one I just showed with the two-way protected bike lane on the west side that provides access to the Hank Aaron State Trail. However, instead of having a northbound protected bike lane, we take up the additional space with a striped median. So we'll pause now for questions on the second segment. And as a reminder, here are the 3 options that we are considering.
So we do have a couple of questions. One is on the need for bicycle lanes. What statistics do you have on bicycling use?
We do have bicycling crossing data. I don't have it at hand right now. We could follow up with that information. One of the reasons we do have existing bike lanes on this bridge structure, so we want to enhance those. This is identified as a bicycle priority street by the city. And then that access to the Hank Aaron State Trail is really important to allow people to safely get to and from the Hank Aaron State Trail.
Another question about those bike lanes. When you say protected, do you mean concrete barriers like a Jersey barrier or concrete bollards, or do you mean flex posts?
Mhm. That's another detail that will be figured out as we proceed in design. Part of what we need to consider in this section is the bridge structure and how much weight we can put on it. So we may be able to use concrete Jersey barriers or other concrete posts. In some sections, we may not be able to do it throughout. We'll have to do that analysis and figure out what load the bridge structure can carry, and that will help determine the barrier.
There are two more questions. What efforts are being made to improve the final visual look? Some recent designs are cited as being visually unattractive.
Yeah, we know that aesthetics are definitely important for people to feel welcome and like it's a high quality project. Again, those are some details that will be figured out as design proceeds, but understanding what visual aesthetics are important to people is good for us to know as we proceed with the design of this project.
We have one more question that's sort of about the project as a whole. What is the impact to taxpayers for the construction and the maintenance costs? Will the project have an impact on tax dollars? And if so, how?
David, are you able to try to
Well,
answer that?
had the project been able to go fully through, it was 100% funded by the federal government. So yes, technically your tax dollars are being used, but it's from the federal government, so it's the entire population. There was not going to be any city dollars for this project. Maintenance, we're out there maintaining the roadway as it is for both, street cleaning, sweeping, leaf removal, snow removal. Any potential future construction or however it gets modified may have an increase in maybe how those operations have to take place when a final design and construction occurred. So it'd be a small, uptick in maybe it takes more man hours to clear it because we've created whatever might have occurred out there. But again, typically we would do that with the existing crews that we have doing the work citywide as we do currently.
One more question about the barrier design. Have concrete or heavy duty planter boxes been thought of as barriers for these projects? Examples are cited in both Carmel, Indiana, and in Europe as well.
Concrete Jersey barriers are being used currently on this project. I'll go back to the this image. So the rightmost image, you can see the concrete Jersey barriers that was painted by Menominee Valley Partners. Also in the city of Milwaukee, on North and Locust, those bridges have concrete Jersey barriers as well, and Howley Road also. So those have been used throughout the city. Again, as far as planter boxes, that would need to be something that the city would need to understand the ongoing maintenance costs with that, or identify a partner that could help maintain. I think that would be one of the biggest challenges with using a planter box. So again, like I said previously, we haven't determined the barrier yet. That's all part of our continued design efforts once we select a preferred alternative. Good to move on?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so heading into downtown, we've got segment 3. So this goes from Clybourne Street to McKinley Street. So one thing to note about this, what the cross sections we have on the left, we call them our typical cross section. It's meant to be a typical view of the segment we're looking at. In this section, it was difficult to develop a typical cross section because it varies so much throughout the corridor. We have a lot of left turn lanes and other changes throughout the corridor. But in general, the right-of-way width that we have to work with is 110 feet. There are typically 2 driving lanes in each direction. There are often left turn lanes at intersections. And there is also typically a parking lane or a loading zone lane, some kind of curbside use. It could also be a bus stop. So the cross section there on the left, the image below is at State. So that's what that cross section looks like. In this area, we have a lot of large uses. So Fiserv Foreign, MATC, the Milwaukee Theater, and the Baird Center are just a couple of the large uses we have there. So we have a lot of people at specific times of day and days of week for different events. We can get a lot of people walking, a lot of traffic, but it's not always consistent. So our average daily traffic in this corridor is 14,800. Again, kind of higher speeds, about 60% of people are driving over 30 miles per hour, and almost 19% are going over 40 miles per hour. So we have 4 options here. As you'll recall, this is a really heavily used transit route. So a couple of our options include transit-only lanes. So our first one shows center running transit-only lanes. We also have protected bike lanes throughout this corridor. One thing that I'll note is that we show either one-way protected bike lanes or two-way protected bike lanes. For the majority of the options we have here, we could do either one-way protected bike lanes or two-way protected bike lanes. That's something that we're seeking feedback from people on. So again, here we've got center running transit-only lanes, 1 driving lane in each direction. We've got lots of opportunities to add green infrastructure or street trees, really helping to green the corridor. One thing you don't see in this cross section is parking, which does not mean we're removing it. We can have parking where there are some of the trees, where we don't need to have a transit shelter. We could also shift the lanes to accommodate parking. So we will have the opportunity to have parking or loading zones. Our next option also has transit-only lanes. However, these are on the right side. So if you're familiar with the Bus Rapid Transit route, Connect 1 on Wisconsin Avenue, this is similar to that. So again, we have protected bike lanes. Here we're showing 2-way protected bike lanes, but it could be either a 1-way or 2-way protected bike lanes. 1 driving lane in each direction. And again, a lot of opportunities for trees or green infrastructure. And similarly to the last one, we will be able to accommodate parking or loading zones where you see a transit shelter or where you see some of the trees. This next option does not have transit-only lanes. We've got 2 driving lanes in each direction. The buses will use the driving lanes and do in-lane bus boarding, which means rather than pulling over to the side into a parking lane, they will stop in the lane to load and unload passengers, which allows them to increase reliability and travel times. We've got a pretty wide median here where we can have trees or green infrastructure. And then again, we've got protected bike lanes, whether that's 1-way protected bike lanes or 2-way protected bike lanes. And similar to the other options, we can have parking where there's a transit shelter or where there's a planting strip. And our last option really puts everything in the cross section. So we maintain 2 driving lanes in each direction, but we also have transit only lanes. Here we're showing them as center running transit lanes. So the transit shelters would be in a median in the middle of the street. In this option, we could only do 2-way protected bike lanes because of the space needed for the driving lanes and the transit lanes. Here, we could accommodate parking by when we don't have a median. So lanes may need to shift a bit to accommodate parking. So those are the 4 options we have. It's a lot to take in. So we will pause now for any questions on this segment.
We have one question. It applies more to the northern end of the corridor, but I think the whole corridor have traffic studies been completed? This question is asking specifically at 6th and North Avenue, but could be applied throughout the entirety of the corridor.
Yes, we have done traffic analysis. Tim, would you want to comment on that at all?
Yeah, we have completed a traffic analysis. We're in the process of reviewing the results of that with the city and WSDOT.
Yep, so we will take that analysis into consideration as we're selecting our preferred alternatives for each of these core segments.
And Kate, I was just going to add too, I think just for clarity, the project limits do shift slightly at the north end of the corridor. So we are focused on 7th and 8th Street along North Avenue and not 6th Street when we get to the northern end. So just clarifying that part of the question as well.
Okay.
So there's a lot of content in this question. I'm just going to skip to the question, but it is recorded in the notes. So 2 questions, sorry. In the first option, can there be small rubber barriers put into place that separate buses from the car flow, but are still able to be run over by emergency vehicles? Apparently there's precedent for this in Bogota, Colombia, and other cities in that area.
It's possible. Again, that's something that as we proceed with design, we can determine if that's feasible and if that's desired for this project.
And then the second question, what of these 4 options provides the most benefits to pedestrians?
Yeah, I think they all have something to add to pedestrians, and a lot of what will improve conditions for pedestrians might not be represented in a cross section. That happens a lot at the intersections and how we improve crossings. So as we continue with design, we'll be evaluating how we can improve conditions for people walking at the intersections and throughout the corridor. I would say all of them, most of them have a median in the middle to help with reducing crossing distance, or at least give people a place to rest in between. The 4th one is probably the most challenging for people because it is going to be a longer distance or fairly long distance for people to cross. And we'll have to evaluate the opportunities for medians, but that one might be the most challenging.
Another question, as part of this project, are you considering pulling transit stops back from intersections more towards the center of the block to avoid right turns in front of buses and improving the sight lines of pedestrians?
Yeah, again, that will be something as we select a preferred alternative. We'll work with MCTS. They've been a partner on this project in determining where to place transit stops, but we definitely want to make sure that they're placed in an area that's most safe for people who are using transit.
Just want to give it about 10 more seconds. All right.
Okay. So we've made it to our final segment. So this goes from McKinley Avenue to North Avenue. So as Mike just noted, while this is on 6th Street, south of Brown, north of Brown, it does transition to 7th Street and 8th Street. 6th Street is disconnected from the remainder of the corridor and it's more residential street. So it does continue on the 7th and 8th Streets. And those are different designs than the typical cross section we're showing here. So as we select our preferred alternative, we will need to modify our design as we build out the design for the whole project. So in this segment, we have about 130 feet of right-of-way, so pretty wide there. Again, if you're familiar with this part of the project area, you'll probably know that north of Walnut Street, some protected bike lanes were added as well as in-lane bus boarding. So you could see an image of the floating bus stop in that center image on the top. So this cross section represents south of Walnut Street. So we have 2 driving lanes in each direction, striped on-street bike lanes, and then parking, the pretty wide median, and then some areas for street trees and landscaping. So traffic volumes here are quite a bit lower than throughout the corridor, about 5,600. We do have quite a bit of people driving over the speed limit, particularly people who are heading south of Walnut into downtown. There's a hill that they're going down and it's pretty wide open space. So we have about 84% of people going more than 30 miles per hour and about 20% going more than 40 miles per hour. So we have 2 options for this part of the corridor. So one is really adding a lot more greenery to the corridor, keeping that wide median, having 1 driving lane in each direction, maintaining a parking lane on each side, and then having in-lane bus boarding. So you can see on the right side, we have a transit shelter there. The bus would stop in the lane at the transit shelter to let people on and off. And then when there isn't a transit shelter, that would be a parking lane. We do have a double row of trees on each side of the street with a raised protected bike lane. Again, similar to the downtown section. This could be 1-way or 2-way, and then fairly wide sidewalks. And our second option is pretty similar to the last one, except we shrink everything down. Like I said, we do have a pretty wide right-of-way here, but with the traffic needs, we don't really need that much space to accommodate all of the uses. So one option that we have is for the city to do what we call vacate that right-of-way. So if that right-of-way was vacated, it would go to the adjacent property owners. So people who live along 6th Street could have a larger yard, or could be used for other community uses or perhaps potential new development. So this would still have pretty wide sidewalks on either side, a row of street trees, 1 driving lane in each direction, in-lane bus boarding, and then on-street parking. Again, we would have a raised protected bike lane, which again could either be 2-way or 1-way, depending on what we do throughout the corridor and what we get feedback on. Okay, so final questions and answers. If you've got questions about the project in general that you did not ask before, you can ask those now, as well as any questions related to this specific segment.
I do want to, there is one question here that is just clarifying. In the protected bike lane scenario, are there bike lanes between two vehicle lanes?
In 2 vehicle lanes. I don't think so.
It looks like the bike lanes are on the outside of the roadway.
Yeah, all of the options since except with the exception of the bridge structure, as I noted, all of these are being planned for full reconstruction, which means that we can create build raised protected bike lanes, so sidewalk level protected bike lanes. So they would not be next to vehicle lanes.
So this question is, are there plans for signage or wayfinding to help people discover nearby neighborhoods, small businesses, and attractions, not just along 6th Street, but also connecting in adjacent corridors like historic King Drive?
It's a great question. That's something that came up a lot when we had in some of our stakeholder meetings that we've held, and then in our workshops that we've had with the City of Milwaukee and MCTS. Again, that's more of a final design decision, but something we are noting for future design that we've heard a lot about people wanting more wayfinding.
Where can we view the going forward financial requirements and status of this project?
So our project website will be the best place to get updates on this project. You can sign up for email updates. I'll flip to this next slide just so I can get it up, but I can go back to the previous one. So the project website is engage.milwaukee.gov/6th Street, 6th-Street. So there's where you can sign up for updates on the project and see the status of the project. So this contract does go through, or what the city has funded is through what we call 30% design or preliminary design. So after that, there may be fewer project updates as the city seeks funds for the remainder of the project, but that's going to be the best way to stay up to date.
A question about the whole corridor. When this I-794 is reduced or removed, how will this impact this project?
Mike, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, sure. I think, yeah, and David can certainly add on. I think the city of Milwaukee is coordinating very closely with the Wisconsin Department of Transportation on the I-794 Lake Interchange study. So that study is led by the Wisconsin Department of Transportation. And the city is moving forward with the 6th Street corridor with the best information we have at hand, and we'll continue to stay engaged with that Lake Interchange study team to determine if there are any impacts to the design of this corridor. David, anything to add from your perspective?
No, that was yeah, pretty much what we've got going on right now.
Right now, there are no questions in the queue.
Okay, well, we will stay on since this goes for 5 more minutes. Thank you all for joining us today. As a reminder, if you have additional questions, please send them to our project email, 6thstreetproject@hntb.com. Like I said, you can sign up for updates and view project materials on our project website. Please fill out a comment form online, give us some more feedback on these segments, and please do that by November 21st. So again, we'll keep on here for 4 more minutes, see if anybody asks any final questions. Otherwise, again, thank you all for joining us today.
Another question. How do we look up the short and long range plans for King Drive and North Avenue?
I believe if there are plans, it would be on the City of Milwaukee's Department of City Development planning website. That's the best repository of all plans. It's also possible that if King Drive bid has its own, it may be on their website. That would be my best recommendation.
There are currently no questions with 2 minutes left.
Okay, well, in our last minute, I'll just say another reminder to ask any final questions that didn't get answered today to our project email, 63project@hntb.com. Check out the project website, engage.milwaukee.gov/6-street to view all the public meeting boards, this presentation, and to fill out a comment form. We are accepting comments through November 21st. So we look forward to hearing from everybody. Thanks again for taking the time to meet with us today. Okay, I think we can end the meeting now. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.